Hello, am I live? Sorry about that today. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of No Excuses. I am your show host, your lonely show host, Volacel. I'm the only one who is here. The others have ditched me. They have found better things to do. That's not strictly true. They haven't found better things to do. In fact, they both wish that they could be here, because Aristeele is stuck on a beach in Florida, which may sound like a good thing, but to him, there is no greater hell. He is considering suicide by Stingray because he desperately wants to be off the beach in Florida. And Fern has been given the unenviable task of pulling triple duty at work because they are down 2 drivers. So that leaves just me, who is blissfully having a normal weekend, except I am also filling in for 2 people now. So yeah, there you have it. I don't actually know how to run the recording rig, and I am probably going to mess this up pretty gravely. Last time I did a solo show, didn't go so well. This time, expect it still won't go so well, but you can't have everything you want. So, I am going to be, quote, playing, unquote, a bit of Xtella in the background, but the odds on I won't do much playing. If I'm lucky, I'll have this concentration to spare to continue running in a circle, but I don't think that's going to be the case, because managing everything myself is not terribly easy. So this is liable to be a short show. I can't really see any way around that. Even for people who are really experienced at doing solo shows, your voice basically craps out around 45 minutes, 1 hour at best, even if you know what you're doing and you have plenty of content. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't have plenty of content. But if you would like to get involved with the show and provide me with some content, either for this week or at some point in the future, feel free to do so, and you can contact us at noexcusesvtw@gmail.com, or you can join us on the Twitter. Follow us on the Twitter at noexcusesvtw, or join us in our Discord server, and you can easily get to the Discord server by simply going and clicking on the link that will be provided in the description underneath any of our archived shows on YouTube. I don't remember exactly how to add that link myself, so hopefully Fern can clean up after the mess that I make when he gets back from his death march, I suppose you could call it. Anyway, we'll mush on as best we can, to the extent that I can by myself, not knowing what I'm doing, but oh well, there you have it. So, what would we normally do if all the show hosts were here? We would talk about our weeks. This week for me has been another busy week at work with lots of late nights, mostly filling in paperwork because, well, we've got the audit coming up at work, and that means that we need to make sure every piece of documentation is squared away. This is basically a task that is never complete and never successful. So, ultimately, I am stuck in a position where I am going to be signing lots and lots and lots of things where people should be signing things and are not, and more or less going to be going through that process and then cleaning up afterwards once the audit is over and they are issuing a list of corrective actions, which invariably seems to happen. The thing with auditors is that they're kind of like lawyers. They will take any opportunity that they can to run up the bill as much as possible, even though I don't think it actually affects their salaries in the case of audits that are sort of provided for by what is essentially a government regulatory body to some extent, but they do still seem to run up the bill and take as long as necessary and issue as many cards as necessary to give themselves stuff to do. So yeah, the corrective action process is liable to take a long time to deploy given the low staffing numbers that we're working with. So my stressful days may continue at length, but hopefully I can take a holiday soon because I badly need one. Anyway, that aside, I haven't played a great deal of Monster Hunter this week. I have sort of always been meaning to, and always been tired or distracted or busy with other things. My short-term goal that I have more or less completed, although not quite, was to get a set of Rathian armor for my character. After the show last week, Fern and I did a few hunts to get me up to par with him at hunt rank, whatever it is, 4 maybe. So we can do the high rank stuff and start getting some more meaningful equipment. That was relatively successful. We didn't have any major failures. Things went pretty smoothly, but my armor was starting to really show its being out of date, since I'd been using it since the early stages of low rank, and as a result I would get hit by a monster and lose half my health and spend most of my time running around in circles drinking potions while Fern fought the monster. I still feel, based on my experiences therein and my subsequent experiences repeatedly hunting and bullying Rathian up and down the Shrine Ruins, that the riding mechanic is still too powerful. The more time I spend with it, the more I feel like, if anything, the purpose that it serves is to just make a fight shorter so you don't get bored. It's very much a novelty gimmick, is the impression that I get from it. And I know I've said as much before, but I haven't. Basically what I'm getting at is I haven't experienced anything that changes that impression. More or less my experience is that, oh well, that's nice, a monster has rolled up, I will subdue it, climb on its back, and use it to fight with for, a span of 15 seconds to break up the monotony or whatever it is, and then we'll go back to doing our dance. But I really don't think that the game is better off for having it there, and the previous mounting system, it was a bit simplistic and it was lacking in several ways, but it still felt more like part of the fight. It felt like something you might actually attempt to do, and the sort of unpredictableness of the monster that you are riding was part of the fun. It's like, well, where is it going to run? Is it going to try and scrape me off against the wall or what? And the fact that the monsters basically don't interact with you or each other in any meaningful way, sort of, it bothers me a little bit. It seems kind of, I don't know, the game feels gamey is the easiest way to put it, and that to a lot of people might be a non-issue, but coming from Monster Hunter World as my only experience of the franchise, it seems to me that they took a step backward in a lot of ways there. It's an entry to the franchise that I feel seems very heavy on quality of life, but it's come at the expense of the verisimilitude, which made a lot of things about it cool. I don't know. It's hard to really describe. I think that even if I criticize it, it's almost looking at criticizing it for the sake of criticizing it in a way, because I enjoy it so much that it's almost a non-issue that there are things about it that I think are silly or wrong or bad. I'm going to play a little bit here, or at least I'm going to try to. I'll probably lose the match because I'm not going to be paying much attention to what's going on. It's a very low level, but I'm playing a character that I have never played before, and I can't remember how this particular part goes, so oh well, I'll just run around and hit some things. Pass the time, So yeah, I haven't played much of Monster Hunter, mainly because for me the whole idea of investing in Monster Hunter is very much for the sake of playing with Fern and Ari. Like it is a game that I do enjoy playing by myself, but it's a game that benefits very, very much from having people to play with. To a very, very great extent, it would not be really worth playing if that wasn't an option in some ways. So simply because it feels like it's really set up for it. The more time I'm compelled to spend doing the rampage fights, the more obvious it is that that's the case as well, because the rampages are really they're stressful and annoying, and you feel like your attention's being pulled in too many different directions. Maybe there are people that relish that type of challenge, but I don't really feel that I'm one of them. I very much want to focus on an objective to perfect, rather than trying to manage a massively complex situation that keeps changing all the time. I guess that's why I was never really a fan of tower defense or MOBAs or anything, because of the way that it requires you to split your attention so aggressively between so many different things, and it's something that I just find kind of difficult. Yeah. At any rate, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to try doing a rampage with Fern and maybe with Ari, because Ari did pick it up. He just hadn't had time to play it at last time I spoke to him. I don't know. I guess he must have taken his Switch with him to Florida when he's got downtime. I mean, some of the stuff that he's been compelled to do seems pretty ridiculous. He showed me a picture of some sort of bizarre fish-themed ornamentation that his mother and sister procured at some exorbitant fee. It's just this hideous piece of sort of pseudo-modern art-looking crap attached to the wall of the condo that he's helping them set up. But yeah, it seems like kind of a thankless and pointless task, really. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Hopefully he's got some spare time and took a Switch with him so that he can devote some time to getting caught up, because I very much want to try playing out some of these systems with some people that I like playing games with, as opposed to myself, because you sort of get bullied in a way into doing these rampages a couple of times in the story that I've seen so far, and particularly the second one is quite an awful experience solo, because you feel like you're fighting a losing battle, and it's kind of a bit difficult to get your bearings, because you don't really know. Sometimes it feels like you're supposed to be losing, almost, to advance the plot, so to speak. Or not really the plot so much as the process of the way the match is meant to go. But yeah, when you get to the end of it and you're fighting the Apex monster, which only drops Apex parts when you're fighting it in Rampage, by the way, despite the fact that they added them to the game proper to appear as sort of like invaders, I suppose, out in the world. The Apex monster just feels like an enormous sack of hit points, and the whole thing just feels a bit lacking as well, because while it's Apex monster, it's big, it looks different, it acts a little bit differently, it's got a few strange habits. It's got a huge amount of hit points, but there are two things that make this sort of like just kind of a weird tack to take with the design of the game system, is that all of the numbers get jacked through the roof. So on balance, the monster doesn't really have a huge amount of hit points, because by the time you're at that sort of crisis point where the Apex is going to appear, you probably have, through various buffs that appear, jacked your damage output through the roof, so you're going to be hitting pretty hard. But it's also, it lacks the sort of variation that the fights tend to have when taking place on the normal maps. I suppose that this is all because you're supposed to provide terrain to fit your needs, as it were, by setting up your defenses in advance for the Rampage map. But in practice, it just feels like, oh well, what this really means is that rather than seeing varied terrain and pursuing the monster and hunting the monster around a stage, instead of doing that, you are merely fighting the monster in the same place the whole time. And while you can set up lots of manned defenses and stuff to help you fight the monster, my experience in practice of doing the Rampage was that if you should dare to try and hop on a ballista or something to shoot at the monster, the net result of that is the Apex will immediately turn from whatever it's doing and jump on your face, and so you don't ever actually get to use it. This is one of those things that sounds like it would be remedied by multiplayer, because you can have somebody distract a monster while you proceed with the process of exploiting the defenses that you set up properly, as opposed to those things basically being a decoration by that point in the fight. At any rate, that's enough about that. I haven't had much time to play it because of Fern being so busy. But yeah, I hope to in the future, because there's a lot about that I like, despite my many complaints about a variety of issues. It's certainly not so bad that I think that I want to stop playing it or anything like that. The only thing that stops me playing it is time or lack of people to play it with, and even then I've spent a lot of time on the solo game. Anyway, I'm going to lose if Nero gets to that concert stage. We all lose if Nero gets to sing. That's just the way of things in the Fate universe. Nero should never be permitted to sing. But yeah. Speaking of, the main dump of my time was an incredibly banal activity, but one that I sort of felt compelled to which I suppose is the mechanic of most mobile games. In the latest event, the Lady Rhona's Case Files event in FGO. Now, it contains a rerun, effectively, of a very famous fight in the history of FGO, and this is the Barbatos fight. Now, for those who don't know, in the first arc of FGO's main story, there was a lot of sort of real-time tie-ins, whereas like the time in universe moved at the pace of the time out of universe if you were playing sort of live while you if you were like progressing through the story live at the same time that content was being released. That was the way you would experience the game. And when they were up to the final chapter of the initial storyline, there was a server-wide event called the Temple of Time, and over the course of the Temple of Time, there would be a variety of Demon Pillar boss fights that were up at the same time, and each of them had a certain number of lives, and collectively across the entire server, you had to kill each of these Demon Pillars enough times to overcome them and advance the story. Now, this was an interesting novelty to most people, but what became very quickly apparent is that a lot of people had used their what the fandom refers to as clairvoyance EX, which means look at what the Japanese server did and draw information from that on the best course of action to take. So clairvoyance EX ran rampant, and a lot of people realised that there was this one fight, this one Demon Pillar, which had disproportionately high drop rates of very sort of difficult to acquire in large quantities materials for skill ups, and that basically everybody wanted them, nobody could get enough, and grinding them took a long time. So everybody basically homed in on this Demon Pillar and bullied the crap out of it. Its number of kills on that one dropped through the floor almost its lives remaining dropped through the floor almost instantaneously. It had a very short lifespan. This fight became famous, and there were lots of memes that went around about people bullying the Demon Pillars, because I mean the situation in story was a rather dire one. You're massively outmatched, and only due to the sort of ridiculous style of Deus Ex Machina that is so traditional in the Fate universe was the only thing that prevented the entire narrative from turning into a rout. So there's this enormous contrast where the Demon Pillars are supposed to be this horrific, almost insurmountable opposing force, and yet the entire player base has rallied around one to beat the ever-living crap out of it just because they can. And so yeah, it was a very amusing scenario, but it became kind of legendary as a loot pinata, and so they decided to insert this fight again into the Lady Rhona's Case Files event as sort of like the sort of the crown jewel of the progress through the storyline, whereby the Demon Pillar would manifest and everybody would get another chance to beat it up. Now, I was not quick off the drawer when it first deployed in Temple of Time, because I didn't really know about it. I hadn't really been paying attention to what people were doing and what people were planning as far as that was concerned. So I didn't get a lot of kills in on any of the Demon Pillars, really, because I had a pretty weak roster at the time. It wasn't well developed, certainly wasn't strategically developed the way a lot of people build their rosters. A lot of water under the bridge since then. My roster's actually pretty hefty now. It's pretty powerful, and I invested a lot of resources in raising my Littlest Sith Lord, Mysterious Heroine X Alter, to a ridiculous level of power. And so, coupled with the fact that I've gotten several meta servants, important meta supports over the course of time, I was now ready to go for this next encounter with Barbatos. Unfortunately, it decided to land at a time where I'm going to have to spend a lot of time at work. But I made the most of the opportunities that I had, and I managed to kill Barbatos 216 times before the end of the raid. The raid lasted about 3 days ish. It ended this morning. So yeah. Actually, I'm just going to give up on trying to do this. I'm not really playing properly. I'm just running around in circles, so we'll just leave that as is for the time being. Yeah, so I'm not going to say it was riveting activity, because I had killing Barbatos down to a fine art. I was able to kill him on turn 1 every single one of those 216 fights without him ever getting a shot off, using a unimaginative but very effective MHX Alta Skadi build with Black Grail on MHX Alta, and basically filling the slots with as many plus QP craft essences as I could, and then it was just turn 1 kills from top to bottom. But yeah, that occupied a significant amount of my time, because, well, you don't get the opportunity very often to completely obviate the need to ever farm assassin jewels ever again. I mean, there aren't that many assassin servants in the game relative to other classes, generally speaking, but now that I have 600 odd assassin gems, I probably won't need to worry too much about having to farm up materials for them anymore. So yeah, it was material bonanza. I managed to get my new Zhuge Liang servant to maxed out skills, as well as building up more than 200 million QP on top of that. So yeah, that'll keep me in good stead for a little while longer. I did drain all of my St. Quartz trying to roll for Rhinos and failing miserably. After my grand successes of the past couple of banners, I basically have run plumb out of luck, and got some deeply appalling rolls. The only gold servant that I got on the Rhinus banner was Chevalier Dion, an entirely useless saber. I haven't actually seen any builds personally where people have tried to even draw any practical benefit out of Chevalier. So yeah, there's just no reason to put that servant in your team. It's the case with a lot of semi supports that lean more heavily on the support side tend to be useless, because a semi support that has offensive capability, they can still plug a gap where you've got a damage deficit or something, but if they lean heavily on the support side, they end up just being a bad version of a hard meta support, like your Waver and your Skadi and your Merlin. Those ones, they're all support all the way. You don't use them for any offensive potential, but they do their job well. And when you've got ones like Dion who are supporting, but they don't really go all the way. They try and act like there's some other role for a support other than doing pure really heavy support. Like you simply can't use a servant like Dion to push out someone like Merlin. It's silly. You can't do that. There are a few that are close to being hard supports and don't quite make it all the way, like Osaka Behime, and I use her a lot, partly because she's cute and mostly because she's assassin class. And since all of the really hard meta supports are casters, apart from Rhinos, who once she finally hits her stride after her major strengthening, will provide a rider who's also a hard support. Osaka Behime is close to being a very powerful support, but rounds out her power as a support simply by being resistant to the class that is usually used to hose down supports by fight design. Because any time that the fight design wants you to lean not too heavily on your caster supports carrying the fight for you by making your servants disproportionately powerful, they'll just add typically riders to the enemy composition, and then it becomes a mess that you've got to fight your way through, because if you catch a stray crit, your supports will just die. But Osaka Behime doesn't have that issue because she's assassin. But yeah, so I haven't finished the event yet. I'll finish it over the next couple of days probably. There are still some tough fights left to go. Nemesign is the storyline boss for the Lady Rhinos Case Files event. I haven't fought her yet, but she's got a bit of a reputation for being a sucker punch, because most end of event bosses that are not the challenge quest boss tend not to be abusively difficult. They can be a bit of a challenge, yeah, but they're not really, really harsh. But in this case, Nemesign just has a straight up 50% resistance to all damage. So your ability to simply push through the health is nerfed pretty significantly. And most people will go to great lengths to tackle this by amping an alter ego class through the roof or something like that. Also, the boss is, I believe, a rider that summons casters, so exploiting an assassin weakness is not great. And because the boss is a rider, as aforementioned, she absolutely hoses caster supports. And what's more, her Noble Phantasm purges all buffs, so you can't defend yourself. You basically have to kill Nemesign before she kills you. That's your only option. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to do that, because the break bar system means that even though my littlest Sith Lord can hit for 700,000 damage in a turn, if the boss has 700,000 hit points split across 3 break bars, it'll still take 3 turns to kill. And this boss, every time it loses a break bar, will freeze up your Noble Phantasm or your skills, so you can't just go back to back to back, bam, 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 knock the enemy down. So, yeah, I'll think about how I'm going to do it. I'll probably try and combine Martha and Meltrilus or something and just purge the debuffs as they come in. We'll see how it goes anyway. As far as events go, it's been a bit of a novelty. Seeing this is structured around sort of reminiscence fights, so you'll go back and you'll fight memories of previous events, except that all the memories have been meddled with a little bit, so they have defects in them. So, for instance, there are wyverns that are giant chickens and that sort of thing. But yeah, so yeah, it's the regular stuff in FGO. Don't remember quite what's coming out after this event. Maybe it is the next Lost Belt, or maybe it is the next Gouda. I can't remember. But yeah. Anyway, moving on to other things. Anime. Most of the seasonal anime that I'm watching is pretty much running in its groove. I feel like I'm kind of enjoying the season. Most of the shows that I watch, I'm interested to see what will happen next, and I watch the next one. I don't know that there are really any that I think are, that for me personally are really standouts. I've been enjoying. I've been killing slimes for 300 years in sort of a junk food way. It's sort of fluffy and easy to watch. The spider one, I feel, is going out of its way to contort the story as much as possible. It's really not clear what's going on, because the aforementioned sort of difference in time scale at which things are happening, that is to say, the experience of the spider main character's life 15 years prior to the hero main character's life, they have deliberately, the writer has deliberately chosen to synchronize the people appearing in those events to the maximum degree to confuse the watcher or reader as much as possible, is what it feels like to me. So even though if I sit down I can work out which parts of the story are taking place in the past and which in the present and how they relate to each other, yeah, it's not difficult to work out or anything like that. But when you're actually shown it all the time, it's hard for your brain to keep it straight when you're just passively watching, because it's a mess, really. You've got the Demon Lord, who's the progenitor of the race that the main character is a part of, and they appear to be in conflict with each other because basically when it comes down to it, the main character is a extremely disobedient spawn of the Demon Lord. But it seems like the Demon Lord is also like not a natural being in the world, and there's so many dangling plot threads and unanswered questions that it's starting to just feel like it's turning into a mess. Like almost like the comparison that always springs to mind is Lost. a story that they dropped so many clues and plot threads without actually having a way to tie them all up that it turned into a mess, and everybody was disappointed in the end because they came up with reasoning that basically everybody felt was bullcrap. I don't know how the Spider story goes. I haven't even looked into whether the manga or light novel, I can't remember which is the progenitor, is ongoing or finished, or if they actually did have a plan or how it all works. But the way that it's currently going in the anime is starting to feel like a multiple car pile up. Doesn't feel like a very clear and well directed story at all at this point. It feels like they keep dropping in new plot elements. And it's not like it's not interesting. There's some interesting things going on, but I feel like the story is being overcomplicated. The isekai heritage is starting to become a bit of a burden. They're certainly trying to play out the implications of it in a different way and to a greater extent than many other stories do, because many stories in this genre that everybody is sick of is the isekai conceit exists solely to provide the main character with overwhelming power. And while to a certain extent it does in this one as well, there are so many competing interests tied up to the isekai that it's a much more complicated issue at hand. However, the baggage of being an isekai and having the whole power gamey sort of structure of the world tied up in it as well is making it difficult to follow in some ways, especially with the constant evolution and changing of what characters look like. Just because you see a character in one scene and then when you see them in another scene, if they look different, it might still be the same person. It's hard to tell because this world is built like a game. People evolve and change in a literal way in real time. So yeah, I don't know, this whole isekai is not a bad genre by nature. It's a bad genre because of what isekai has come to mean now, which means a character is teleported into a fantasy JRPG world with overwhelming power. Just that a character gets transported to another world is not necessarily a bad premise, but it's the sorts of tropes that seem to be following it around now are what has made it so cancerous. Like the harem, like the ridiculous power level. At worst, like the smartphone, because that trope has been used not once but several times now. I know smartphones are cool and all. They are a concept that would be incomprehensible to people from an era only a few decades prior to our own, and certainly incomprehensible to the Emperor Qin dynasty, as shown in FGO. But let's not get carried away, alright? It's not an artifact of doom, it's a smartphone. If you went to another world, it wouldn't do anything. So, yeah, I don't... Nobody likes it. The most interesting isekai stories are always the ones that have some other thing tied into it. Like, in the case of Log Horizon, it's tied into A, building a real society, and B, the implications of how nonsense it is that you've got a set of game rules and a set of real world rules, and they're sort of tangled in each other and merging, and as that happens in real time, it has real consequences for people. So they do something interesting there. And you've got other isekais like No Game No Life, where you don't need to care about the other world all that much at all. All it provides the main characters with is a little bit of extra knowledge, and the part that keeps the story interesting is what they do with it and the games that get played. But yeah, speaking of, I can't buy that anymore. Like, I was buying the novels for a while because I enjoy the story, but everywhere suddenly stopped stocking them, and I wonder if it's because the artist had a tendency to draw very salacious pictures of Shiro, the younger sister character, which might have got it banned as child pornography, since apparently everything qualifies as child pornography now. Though I'm starting to think that child pornography might be in the eye of the beholder. Anyway, so I also, against my better judgment and against the advice of not one but several people, I decided to start watching the second season of One Punch Man. Now, the first season of One Punch Man is sort of an odd duck, because this is not a case of Studio A animated the story and did a good job, and Studio B animated the story and did a terrible job by comparison. That's not really the case here. The first season of One Punch Man was done by sort of, you could call it an all-star cast of animators, I suppose, in a way. It was lots and lots of big names in animation, often working under pseudonyms for various legal reasons, presumably, who would animate sequences and episodes as a personal favour to the director or producer. So you have a lot of like top tier talents that were contracted in, often for a song, to just do a bit of work on One Punch Man season 1 and do it to a high degree of polish, relatively speaking, which is part of why the first season contains such a diverse array of animation and directorial styles, whereas the second season is relatively consistent. Unfortunately, I can't just absolve the second season by saying, oh, the second season is more normal, the first season is exceptional in terms of the animating talent involved. Because no, people are right about the second season, it is incredibly lackluster. What I wouldn't say is that the second season is like appallingly bad, just along every axis, or anything like that. It's just bland and done kind of badly. Like, it's not like there's not good material to work with in there. It's just that I'm pretty astonished at some of the staggering lengths the animes have gone to not to show anything cool. Considering how much of the story is about doing cool things, it seems comical that they've managed to exclude so much of that content. Quite absurd. The fights have been dramatically simplified in style and scope from the first season, if they aren't just cutting away to look at something else while the fight takes place. I don't know what the original material is like. The original material and the manga based on it both quite different from the anime in various ways, but it seems to me that what's playing out here is a whole bunch of different fights end up getting synchronized so that every time somebody's about to hit something that they can cut away to the other fight where it has already happened, and then they just continue this process round robin style until the bad guys are defeated or whatever. Oh well, at any rate, I'm going to continue watching it to the end just to say that I did, and it would be nice if they continued with it and picked up the quality a little bit. Tried to be a bit more ambitious with what they incorporated into the animation. That might be nice, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it. It's certainly a cult popular story, but I don't know that it's got the sort of star power necessary to justify another season. Although some of the things that get subsequent seasons that really don't deserve it, I mean, just give One Punch Man a go, guys. Come on, people liked it. I suppose that it's one of those things that Saitama's not going to sell very many figures, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not exactly a big buyer of anime figures. I have 2 figures. They're both in super deformed style. I've got one of Kiyohime and I've got one of Elizabeth Bathory from Fate. That's all I've got as far as figures, and they're just little ones. But most of the people that buy figures of characters who are pretty, who have elaborate outfits or cool weapons or whatever. Caped Baldy Saitama is none of those things. His outfit is not cool, his appearance is not cool, his moves don't look cool, typically speaking. So he doesn't move merchandise the way other things do. So I wonder if that's got some effect on why we haven't seen any continuation of that. Anyway, we'll call that there for the week. I'm trying to fill in for 3 people's weeks, and I haven't really been able to quite manage it. But my throat's already starting to wear out as we close in on the 40-minute mark. But I'll mush on as best I can, and hopefully I won't lose my voice. Alright, last time I checked the email, there was nothing in the email box, and I really could have done with something this week, but I guess I can't have everything that I want. Let's just check one more time to be sure that's not how I go to the email box. No, it's just junk mail from Google. Anyway, So we'll move on to some news topics. Now, we aren't exactly in a news-rich week, but I will try and skip through a few things because ostensibly that's the purpose of the show, is to talk about the news. Though I wonder how much of that we actually do. Anyway, so, first topic. There was a sort of, what would I call it? It's sort of a press release, I guess. It's sort of a announcement article, story, whatever, on the official Xbox news site from Microsoft, and it was mostly the same sort of burbling and optimism that you would expect. Xbox has not had the greatest sort of launch for their new console, but they've shown the most amount of forward thinking, I think, where Sony is aggressively trying to fortify their position. Microsoft really seems to be trying to fortify a position that doesn't exist yet but will in a couple of years' time, which is, there's a lot of wisdom tied up in both strategies, but my gut says that the Microsoft strategy will pay off bigger dividends in the long term, because Sony to some extent is bailing out a sinking ship, and they're doing it in an asinine way because, well, they're based in California, they do everything stupid there. So yeah, but the thing that caught eyes with this particular announcement was that the Microsoft Store PC game sales revenue, the developer share, is going up. So the industry standard for a long time was the Steam one, which was Steam takes a 30% cut of the revenue on everything that's sold on Steam. So when you put your product on Steam, you gain access to an enormous market, but you have to hand over a big chunk of your revenue straight to Microsoft. The Epic Game Store came in one of the ways that they made a splash, and they made a splash in a negative way in a lot of ways as well, but one of the more positive ones was that they took a 12% cut rather than a 30% cut. And while the Epic Game Store has a much smaller audience, that's still a lot of moolah, and as their audience grew, it became more and more moolah. So what Microsoft is doing is basically, it looks like they're planning to match the Epic Game Store, and they're going to give the developer an 88% share of revenue, so they're taking a 12% cut for themselves. Now, Microsoft is basically saying, oh, we are operating on Epic's tier now, and we are declaring direct competition as a platform with Steam. Now, this is the correct move in any which way you slice it. There's no reason to outdo Epic, because you don't need to end up looking like you're trying to start up a monopoly. I mean, you're not going to do that to some extent, because you don't have sort of hegemony over the gaming space on PC yet, because Steam's so powerful. But the fact that Windows is on every computer and they can pre-install on every copy of Windows their Microsoft Store is going to ring some alarm bells amongst the people that saw alarm bells in Internet Explorer being on every copy of Windows. So yeah, because I mean, you've got to remember Microsoft have been hit by the antitrust beat stick in the past, and they don't want to do that again. So there's no real reason to try and do anything too sweeping, which would involve you taking over the PC space, like taking a 1% revenue share or something, just to force everybody onto your platform, because that's too lucrative not to. But matching Epic is about right, because that really puts Epic on the ropes. The deal offered by the Microsoft Game Pass is arguably better than the free games and deep discounts that you can get through the Epic Game Store. And as far as the Steam competition goes, well, I mean, they are better positioned than Epic to compete with Steam, simply because there are lots of people who are already baked into their ecosystem, their sales ecosystem, plus they're bringing console people, and Steam failed to court that audience. Hold on a moment, I need to go and get me some water because my throat's about to crap out. BRB. Right, I should have got the water before I started, but I didn't think about it because I was mainly thinking about the fact that I couldn't find a pinch hitter to help me do the show. Okay. Voice box lubricated. Right. So, this is liable to basically contribute very strongly to that reinforcing a future position that I was talking about earlier. I really do think that we're going to see the two big players in the PC space are going to be Valve and Microsoft. Those two are going head to head. I'm hoping that we will see a response from the market that drives like legitimate competition, because Steam's been able to sit pretty on their sort of primitive, halfway executed community structure that they've got, where, you know, they've sort of got forums and they've sort of got a chat client and they've sort of got this and that and the other, and they haven't had to work on that because their business has been so powerful. Like, as far as the sales go, they have the big audience, they have the people putting the software on their platform. They don't really need to care about all that much. It would be nice for someone to be able to really force them to care, and Epic could have done that, except they kind of crapped the bed because of the way they approached things with exclusivity, because people don't like exclusivity. It's just, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth to a lot of people. The people who are discerning, maybe there are people who will buy anything on any platform, and the sort of people that installed Bonsai Buddy on their, well, if they had been alive during that era, because we're old now, they would have installed Bonsai Buddy on their computer, because they just install any launcher, just install all the launchers, install the Steam launcher, install the GOG launcher, install the Blizzard launcher, install this launcher, that launcher, the other launcher. There are people like that, but most people want their life to be a bit more simple, and they would prefer to pick a platform and work with their favoured platform. And we can see this through, you know, the console wars of time immemorial, where everybody's looking for a reason to justify their alliance to one particular platform. Now, I'm not saying that's a great thing to do, because you're just going to cheat yourself out of things. If you can afford to have a system and you don't, and instead you engage in the console war, that seems like a pointless and counterproductive thing from your personal interests point of view, because you'll miss out on stuff. But yeah, Microsoft is doing all the right things so far, it looks like, to establish themselves as the dominant competitor to Steam, and because they've got such a strong base to work with in terms of bringing people over from Xbox, and the fact that everybody already has access to a Microsoft system in their PC, because, let's be real, apart from a few crazy people who use Linux and a few crazier people who try and play games on a Mac, why? People just use Windows, generally speaking. So they've got an in there, and provided they aren't aggressive enough with their integration to try and to end up attracting the attention of the antitrust people, they are very, very well poised to start making inroads into that market. I don't know what will be the trigger event that will catapult them probably ahead of Epic and into the dominant competitor for Steam position. It'd be nice if they can force Steam out of their comfortable position and get them to think about their revenue share a bit more, because I've got a fair sort of awareness of the fact that small developers really kind of resent having to go to Steam. They know that if they want a good market, they've got to go to Steam, and they're going to turn over that revenue share, because there's nobody with the magnitude of customers that can be made available to them that Steam has. But there isn't anybody who is using Steam who is not also using Windows for the most part. So yeah, that Microsoft Store is going to be a big deal, and the fact that you've got that Game Pass thing offering so much value to people, also going to be a big thing, provided that Microsoft makes good on those agreements in a financial way as well to the companies participating in their program. But yeah, I'm interested to see how things shake down. I'm definitely leaning more in favour of Microsoft with this generation, because while the PS5 is still doing kind of shabby relatively, the PS5 is still doing kind of good relative to Microsoft's kind of shabby performance in the Japanese market, Sony's sort of like blatant refusal to cooperate with Japan any longer, and attempting to dump all of their money into AAA Western smash hits that honestly they've got no draw for me. at all. I'm just not interested in them at the expense of the Japanese titles, which are now going to Steam and Microsoft. Generally speaking, like if you're talking about, say, really weeby looking games, the big one that's on everybody's lips at the moment, the way Code Vein was a few years ago, is Scarlet Nexus. But Scarlet Nexus is all of their advertising straight through Xbox. That's what they're doing now. They've seen that there's this opening in the market, like we've talked about on a previous show. Microsoft hired what's their names? I can't remember. They're not my favourites. So Botan and Luna, from HoloLive, to do promotions for the Xbox Game Pass. That shows are paying more attention than Sony, quite simply, because Sony is basically ostracizing the anime girl archetype, generally speaking, from all of their content. They're censoring them in their games. They are generally driving away from being a platform which is home to games that are styled after Japanese art styles and that sort of thing. They generally seem to be rejecting it, as well as, shutting down the Japan studio effectively and moving everything over to California. I mean, they're just leaving a gap in the market, and Microsoft was already poised and attentive with what they need to do to fill that gap. And Sony is just they're digging their own grave, really. They put in charge somebody who's just a businessman, doesn't play video games, doesn't know anything about video games. The guy in charge of the Xbox program he's much like Sean Layden was with Sony. He knows how games tick and how to really work that system and build a platform that people want to be a part of. Just don't know what's wrong with Sony these days. Well, I'm inclined to think, the woke has rotted their brains, and I'm afraid that might not be too far from the truth. The sort of irrationality all seems to come back to this desire to be seen as a politically sensitive company, coupled with Sony's traditional desire to get sales, and get them today. Not tomorrow, not in 2 years' time or 3 years' time or 10 years' time, but today. They want the sales today, and so they're protecting their sales, always protecting their sales. Anyway, related to this, we also talked about a story a while back about a deal in the offing between Microsoft and Discord for Microsoft to buy Discord. And I was pretty unhappy about that in a lot of ways, because I was afraid that it might go through. I don't really want Microsoft having total hegemony over games communication, which is what buying Discord out and making it part of one of the major platforms would do. Like, I would be just as against Steam buying Discord as I am against Microsoft buying Discord. It would be really convenient if all of the functions of Discord were baked into Steam, sure, but it would mean that, once more we've got one company that's risen massively above the others as far as gaming on the PC as a platform. And, now they've got total hegemony. So I'm much happier for Discord to remain independent and not end up deciding that fight one way or another. With Microsoft already have a solution in that vein, I don't know why they would buy Discord, other than to get access to all those people and bake them into their platform. That's one of those things that feels a little bit like cheating. Like, you didn't compete with your games marketplace to determine how much of the market you got. You just made it so much more convenient to be there that people stop using the other one. It's like, well, once you've got that sort of captive audience, suddenly it doesn't matter so much how you treat that audience, because where are they going to go? They're already on your platform and they have to use it for communications. It seems to me like a bad thing. Like, I didn't want it to go ahead. But anyway, it didn't. I think we reported on that it didn't go through in the end because Discord wanted to stay independent. But one of the reasons that I think it didn't go was the news recently broke that Sony and Discord have brokered a deal between them. Now, this is not like the Microsoft one. Sony are not trying to buy Discord. They are trying to enter into a partnership with them. Now, this is actually a comparatively forward-thinking move on the part of Sony compared to what they normally do, baking Discord functionality into the Sony network, because basically the Sony PlayStation Network needs help as far as communications go. That is not very good. It is not very easy to use. It is not very convenient. The gaming communications really needs a home on that system, and it's much more convenient for all those people who sit in front of their TV and play on their console, which is a lot of people. I sometimes forget that I'm in the minority where I've got my PC and I've got my switches hooked up to my PC and I've got my PlayStation and PSVR hooked up to my PC. Everything is hooked up to my PC. So I just press a button on my monitor to go to a different channel or whatever and then use that device. For most people, that's not the case. So their comms is not necessarily immediately next to their PC, to their PlayStation. So having that communication solution all sorted out so people could, and hopefully at some point in the future they can go seamlessly from their PC to their console and they'll still be signed in to Discord and they can continue their communications using the PC, using the PS4 as or PS5 as a venue. That would be great. What's more, this is it's a very good way for Discord to gain the sort of momentum needed to possibly even become a publicly traded company if they can get that much dosh. And what I mean by this is currently the big dogs in the communications market are Microsoft Teams, Google's Slack, I'm pretty sure Google owns Slack, and Discord. They are the big three. Now, while Teams and Slack are both oriented and developed towards employment environments, they still have the same basic functionality. Like, you can see the heritage that is shared between Discord and Slack in terms of development. It's very, very obvious when you look at the two programs in action. But allowing there to be another player in the market which is very, very much dominant in one particular place, which is, you know, gaming communities, and having them be able to stay independent and from a position of independence broker deals with other major players in the game, that seems like a really good thing for the market, generally speaking. Brokering a deal with Sony, what that basically enables Discord to do is bring on board all of those customers who just play games on PlayStation. Because currently Discord is pretty much restricted to the PC, and there are lots of PC gamers. PC gamers are very familiar with using communications, and, you know, with Ventrilo and TeamSpeak and Mumble and that having fallen by the wayside, and Discord having taken absolute dominance over gaming communications, they've got that market locked down, but they don't have anything in the console market. Being able to break into the console market as an independent competitor, and all of the growth that can grant them, would allow them to grow pretty substantially and possibly get investment as a publicly traded company. Now, I don't want them to have a monopoly rather than Microsoft, but Microsoft will always be around. So if Microsoft wants to see them as the competitor, since they've aligned with one of their direct competitors in the gaming market, Sony, then I think that's all for the better, because that will give an motivation to Microsoft to make it maybe a fork of Teams developed specifically for gaming and grafted into their live service, their marketplace, or whatever. So that, you know, whenever you've got these two big players locking horns, you're going to see progress as they try and one another. That's the ideal. You don't want a situation where they agree and stagnate, and you don't want a situation where one manages to bring so much of the market under its own control that the others can't even think about competing. But Teams, for the same reason as the Microsoft Store, has a lot of penetration in the market already. I mean, we use it at work. Well, I don't. I prefer not to. I don't like people being able to contact me too easily. They might give me work if they did. But, yeah, it's got a lot of market penetration already. I want to see things move forward in a competitive way rather than, you know, everything being decided by who gets to buy out who next. So that Sony and Discord have managed to broker a deal where they will act as partners in order to develop, you know, the movement of gaming communication into the console space. I think it will overall be a good thing. Right. Throat's getting a bit raw. We'll move on to the next topic. Blizz Activision financials for Q1. Now, I don't really want to get too far out into the weeds here, especially since I don't play Call of Duty. I don't really understand how the Call of Duty ecosystem works. It seems very complicated to me. They have their mainline games that keep coming out pretty much every year, actually. Latest one was what? Cold War, I think. They've got their, whatchamacallit, what is it called? Warzone or something? Their Battle Royale. I don't know how well it's doing. I haven't really managed to keep tabs on that and what sort of competition we're looking at. From what I've heard, we're looking at sort of roughly the size of Apex, I think, in terms of participation. And they've got their mobile thing. And through some arcane process probably involving microtransactions, these three lobes of the Call of Duty franchise are all tied together. There is a huge amount of money being pumped into the Call of Duty franchise. Not just by people buying it on that end, but also by in terms of what Activision is putting into this to try and maintain its position in the market. They have tons of studios who are working almost exclusively on pushing forward more Call of Duty stuff. Now, on one hand, they've seen huge growth for this. Like, the financials look really great. I mean, they always do because they're going to put a spin on the financials to make them look good no matter what. But the numbers do look pretty powerful for Call of Duty. The problem is that to me they look brittle. They look really brittle. The numbers are really big. It's a towering growth that they've seen year over year in Call of Duty ecosystem, I think people tend to call it. But it seems to be very brittle. Like, if one of the pieces at the bottom were to crack, everything would come tumbling down. Because it seems to me that Activision has put so much money into Call of Duty that if Call of Duty have a bad spell, like Battlefield did, remember the complete damp squib that was Battlefield 5 and how all the hype came to nothing because people thought that their diversity crap was clownish, their marketing campaign was garbage, and their game was poorly supported and didn't get much content after launch. Like, it was a mess. And that, has knocked EA's contributions to that genre back a few notches for quite some time. And that was, that's a relatively minor setback. But EA are pretty heavily diversified. They've got lots of other stuff on the go. Like, don't they control Apex as well? Isn't that them? Which is as big a competitor as Warzone, and it's completely untouched by their complete balking of Battlefield. So it seems to me that Activision have put way too much. They've bet way too much on the one horse as far as Call of Duty goes. And at the moment, it's going gangbusters for them. But I've heard that there are insiders in the development of, what do you want to call it? The new one that's slated to come out. In fact, they said in this earnings call that they were definitely going to continue their yearly release trend, and their new one, I think it's got one of those generic names like Vanguard or something, was coming out. The people from the inside have allegedly been saying that it's complete garbage fest in there, and they're throwing more and more development time and money at it, trying to haul its fat out of the fire, but it's still looking kind of a mess, and I don't know whether they're going to hit their deadline or not. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll release a whole bunch more remasters of previous Call of Duties like they keep seeming to do. I don't know, people must keep buying them. They're making money hand over fist somehow. But, yeah, so if they have a release of that and it turns out to be complete garbage, if it falls flat, or, I mean, it might not even fall flat on its own accord because it may tie into some aspect of the mobile thing or the Battle Royale thing, and its influence may be pernicious. I've heard it said, although I know, keep in mind, I know zero about Call of Duty. I've heard it said that the Call of Duty Cold War game was sort of balance-wise contaminated their Battle Royale game. I don't really understand that. Maybe it's that when they release a mainline game, it becomes like an expansion pack for the Battle Royale or something, and the balance is bad, or I don't know. I don't know how it works, but generally speaking, it seems like people think it's in a bit of an iffy place at the moment. But if you compounded that, let's say, with the release of another bad Call of Duty, what does Activision have left? They've put everything into Call of Duty. So it seems like they've positioned themselves in a successful but brittle position, which could fracture at any moment if they make one big enough mistake. Okay, so that's Activision, but this is not Activision. This is Blizzard Activision. There is the Blizzard half of the equation, and it's not pretty, to be honest. So, Blizzard have posted modest earnings, modest growth in revenues, 7% year over year. But this seems like bullcrap to me, to be quite honest. Like, what does year over year really mean when you're making your first quarter report? What was happening in first quarter last year? Oh yeah, everybody was playing sodding, what was it called? Battle for Azeroth, and they were hating every minute of it. So, if you freshly release like a first quarter expansion pack, is Shadowlands first quarter? It must be first quarter. When was that? When was that released? Shadowlands. Because I'm that professional. I'm by myself. I'm going to blame everything on that. Because November 23, 2020. I think that's financial first quarter, or at least financial first quarter backs onto it. So, yeah. So the last major content patch for Battle for Azeroth was January 2020. So that was first quarter 2020. And people were playing a new expansion in first quarter 2021. So if you say you've got 7% growth year over year, as reported Q1 2021, what you're actually saying is that we have managed to increase our revenue by 7% on the worst period in recent history for the company. I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. Really not. Coupled to this, you can see it more clearly in their MAUs, monthly active users. Now, monthly active users is one of the most important metrics for engagement if you're a gaming publisher. And it is also not pretty. Let's see. Massively posted this sort of summary of the MAUs going back to quarter 1 2018, and I'll abbreviate this to the major changes. So in quarter 1 2018, they had 38 million monthly active users. And in quarter 1 2020, this earnings report's quarter, 27 million monthly active users. That's not great. That's nearly a third of their users lost over the course of 3 years. And it's been steadily draining away through all of these events. People are going to blame things like COVID. That seems to be the go-to these days. Oh, something not going the way you wanted? Well, we'll blame COVID. We'll blame COVID. It'll be fine. We'll blame COVID. COVID's fault. COVID did it. Blame the COVID. It's got to be the COVID. So, I don't think COVID's got anything to do with it. If anything, people would have spent more time inside engaged with their video if they're locked down in their country or whatever. But the only uptick in monthly active users for Blizzard that happened at all was quarter 3 2019. What happened in quarter 3 2019? WoW Classic came out. That's the only thing that has managed to draw people back. If we look at the transition between quarter 3 2020, well prior to Shadowlands, and quarter 1 2021, where Shadowlands should be sort of they've hit their high point in players, should be, they've seen a drop of 3 million monthly active users in that time. That's really not good. I mean, I think that you could probably say that that Overwatch is partly responsible for this, although I think that Overwatch's losses in player base should have plateaued quite some time ago. But they really haven't done much to nourish that audience from what I can tell. Hearthstone's chugging along in the background. But I think there's also a lot of people were a little bit turned off by the Diablo 2 remake. It looks ugly. Let's just come right out and say that. It looks like every single female character in that game looks like a transvestite. Probably not allowed to use that word anymore. I don't care. Every single one of the female characters looks like a transvestite. They all have a man jaw for some reason. I don't know why. I'm pretending not to know why. The actual reason that Blizzard is paused, but, whatever. So, yeah, basically, the earnings call looks really crap for Blizzard. I don't know what could possibly haul their fat out of the fire. They have made a real mess of things. Everybody is claiming that it's probably not WoW that's causing the Blizzard to hemorrhage all of their users because, well, new expansion pack. But, I mean, usually you would expect them to brag that, oh, our subscriptions have gone up by this amount, right? Our subscriptions are higher now because of Shadowlands. We've hit this number of subscriptions. They don't talk about subscriptions anymore. I wonder why. They've been releasing more and more of these glittering mounts as microtransaction content. I wonder why. Could it be that they're just trying to prop up their revenue because it's a disaster and Shadowlands is just losing money? I don't know. I don't expect Shadowlands to lose money, but the most generous thing I've seen anybody say about it is that it's so it's okay. That's not really what you want from your new product. You don't want people to think it's okay. Although, I mean, there are people who have done okay off of the back of okay. Even in recent times. What was that one? Everybody was talking about it not too long ago. I can't remember what it was called. Let's see if I can find it. There was a title recently. It sort of appeared out of nowhere and everybody loved it, but it didn't seem very clear why everybody loved it. Because they didn't seem to love it. If my browser would not freeze, then maybe I could find what I'm looking for. But apparently my browser does want to freeze, because that's just the way of things. Come on here. Come on, help me out. Help me out. Not doing very well. I can't find it. There's one of the games these days have such generic names that I can't remember what any of them actually are. That's the problem. I wish I could find it. What was the recent news? Maybe I can find it in one of these news channels on YouTube because people were talking about it for whatever reason. No, it wasn't that long ago. Come on now. I guess I just don't have a very good memory. At any rate, Outriders, that was it. So, that game, Outriders, from what everybody says about it, it's so it's average, much like Shadowlands. Everybody played it though. It took off like a rocket. I don't know if it's still going. Probably not. It wouldn't surprise me if the hubbub had died down a bit, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it was still going, because basically their strategy was what I'll call a no bullshit strategy, in that they didn't try and say, oh well, this is live service content or whatever and we're going to continually drip feed you content via microtransactions over the next 5 years or anything like that. No, they just made a game. They made a looter shooter. They packaged it up and they sent it out. So it's generic in every way and it's kind of meh and there's lots of problems with it, but you got what you paid for and you could play the game. You could play all of the content in the game. They weren't holding you anything back. So people felt good about that. They felt comfortable with the purchase proposition because they knew what they were getting when they put the money in. So you can get away with it's okay. But when you're trying to keep an ongoing user base of MMO fans entertained, you can't keep crapping out the same old idiotic mistakes over and over again the way Blizzard has been doing. And they are paying the price. They might be able to hide those numbers from their investors, but they can't hide it from their own sense of shame, because they keep failing. They keep failing again and again, and they only fail because they don't learn. At any rate, they managed to put on a pretty good show for the investors, I think. Like, it comes out looking good. It's only when you look into the fine detail that you find that, they've painted over something that looks a lot grimmer, and they're going to be leaning hard on Overwatch 2 to save them. They're going to be leaning hard on Diablo 2 Remaster to sell really well. And the third prong is they spend a lot of time talking about how, well, I don't want to say they spent a lot of time talking about it, but I feel that they were centering a disproportionate amount of gravity on mobile. So Diablo Immortal is a thing. Don't you guys own phones? Obviously everybody owns phones. So, I mean, when you tell an investor that, what are they going to think? Oh, well, we've got this potential install base that's gigantic. So the investors are going to like that. Plus, then they go on to talk about, we're expanding the Warcraft IP. We've got several mobile projects in the works. We're not going to give you any descriptions of these or any deliverable dates, but we definitely have them in the works. The mobile space is big right now. You can see, based on the Activision half of this earnings call, that look at what Call of Duty Mobile is doing to reinforce the Call of Duty ecosystem. We wanted to do the same thing for the Warcraft ecosystem. What a dreadful thing that will be. I dread to think what could happen when they tie, Warcraft, World of Warcraft and Warcraft Classic and Hearthstone and mobile Warcraft all together with microtransactions. Oh, I dread the thought. But yeah, at any rate, that was that. There's not really much else to say on it. Earnings calls are what they are. That is to say, they're a pack of lies. The purpose is to comfort investors. This is not like a press release where they're lying to the press. It's not like community interaction where they're lying to the community. This is where they lie to investors. So the types of lies are calibrated differently, and the holes in the lies are in different places. But my interpretation of this is that things are rosy on the balance sheet, but they are not rosy on the balance sheet, in the prospective future, 3 or 4 quarters from now. There's a lot of danger coming down the road. It's going to be a tumultuous time. Maybe things will go into stasis and they'll hold the line all year, but I don't know. I don't know that. It's possible. I wouldn't bank on it. I mean, EA is going to be trying to take back their position in the market once they recover from the humiliation that was Battlefield 5. Because Apex hasn't been humiliated. Apex is doing well. For whatever reason, Apex and Valorant to some extent, but mainly Apex, has really taken off in the East compared to Fortnite, which gets a lot less mileage there, and certainly compared to Call of Duty Warzone. So there's the market there. I mean, if you look at, say, the HoloLive VTubers from Japan, they tend to play a lot of Apex. It's very, very popular with that crew and with the audiences who like to watch it. So, yeah. Let's move on to another topic. A bit more of a light one this time. Who remembers Soulja Boy? I don't know if anybody remembers Soulja Boy. He had like one hit rap song in the 2000s or something, and he made $1 gajillion off of it, and has ever since then been trying to break into the gaming space, but in sort of like the retarded gangster rapper kind of way. So he keeps trying to sell these like Chinese knockoff consoles that have ROMs in them as like the Soulja game console. This is his history in the gaming space anyway. So this time he's taken a slightly different tack, and he's not selling, dodgy hardware with illegal games on it. He's actually apparently contracted a manufacturer to produce this thing that is his new game console. I'm not really sure what he's hoping to accomplish, but I don't think he knows either. At any rate, this device is called the TRDR Soulja Boy Game Edition. He's licensed his name to this thing. Now, basically what it is it looks kind of like a Game Boy. I'll steal this image off of TechRaptor and I'll post it in the live show chat. I don't think there's anybody. I don't know that there's anybody listening right now, but I will put it there anyway. So anybody who listens to this can go and trawl through the live show chat to see this abomination. It's kind of ugly, sure, but this is better than before. Before it was like a plastic box with a little circuit board in it and a bunch of ROMs on it. That was what you're looking at for the most part. This thing at least looks like a handheld, though I'm not sure I understand why you would want one. But it's actually not. It's actually not something that is designed exclusively for the purposes of playing illegal games. It is an Android device with, it's got a decent processor, it's got a bit of RAM in there, 4G capability, Wi-Fi, decent battery, Bluetooth, 32 gigabytes onboard storage, 3.5-inch touch screen. Like, it's not like a particularly attractive piece of hardware by any stretch of the imagination. But you can still buy one for a couple $100 on Amazon, and it's not bootleg hardware. It's actual hardware, and presumably, since it's Android, you can just connect to the Android store and get whatever game you want on it off the Android store. So I guess you could play FGO on it if you wanted to. I'm not really sure why, but could. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. He's as usual talking it up in a big way, claiming that he's in talks with Nintendo and Google, who want to buy the company from him. Yeah, I've heard that before. He's basically a big liar who's high on the smell of his own farts historically. So I wouldn't put too much stock in these claims, and I doubt this will sell more than a few units. Probably mostly like the last Soldier game console, it will be sold mostly to streamers who want to show it off and laugh about it on stream. That's what these things are for, typically. So, yeah, there are worse things that he could be doing with his time. He's not campaigning for wokeness, I will grant him that. He is busy wasting his money on crappy game consoles instead. And I will take that any day over him pretending to be an activist. So, next topic. What's next? Tencent. Now, I wrote this down as something to talk about, but it's really complicated, and my throat really probably isn't up to it. But I will give you sort of like the Cliff Notes version. Or the Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes version. So, basically, if you remember, Donald Trump passed a law during his term as president of the United States saying that US transactions with TikTok, TikTok's owners and WeChat's owners were banned. WeChat's owners are Tencent. Tencent is a big player in the gaming market now, for better or for worse, mostly for worse because China. As a result, their investments in the Western markets are very much up in the air now, and they are furiously negotiating with US National Security Panel to try and keep their investments. So, yeah, this is apparently an ongoing matter, according to Reuters, where they're trying to negotiate risk mitigation and so on. Basically, they need to try and convince this particular board of US national security folks that they don't represent a national security issue. I don't know whether the change in administration is going to affect this process or not. It would surprise me if it didn't, but it's possible that it won't, because the ball got rolling before the change in administration. I do wish the administration hadn't changed, because I don't really want the Chinese to get any more of a foothold in the West than necessary. As people may be aware, my country of New Zealand completely bent the knee to China, pretty much. In fact, in the case of New Zealand, they managed to lose ground on both sides, because first thing they did was they bent the knee, and the second thing that they did was accuse the Chinese of crimes against humanity. So they managed to tick off all their allies and tick off China at the same time, because they don't have principles. This is what happens when you get Labour in charge. They don't have principles. So they just... Well, that's not quite correct. They do have principles, but all of those principles are bad. And whenever they try and do something in self-interest, they do it wrong, and they end up causing chaos. Basically, generally speaking, you can celebrate anything that Labour does as a comedy of errors. And this is true of the Labour Party all over the world, by the way. Fern can tell you that the Labour Party in Australia is a clown show, and anybody's been paying attention to the UK news would see that the people of the United Kingdom have given a resounding middle finger to the Labour Party yet again, and crushed their influence on all the local councils as well. The local council is now largely controlled by the Tories. Anyway, that aside, this is an ongoing negotiation for Tencent to keep its holdings. Now, why is this important? Well, Tencent's portfolio is very, very broad in the West. They have way more control over the West than I would like. A quick summary, I would say, is they're the major shareholder for Marvelous. Marvelous have made several games that I've enjoyed in the past. They own 100% of Riot Games, as everyone knows. You know, I never actually checked the sound on this. For all I know, I'm not even coming through. I'm going to actually do that. Hold on, everybody, because I just bumped my microphone cord, and that made me realise that I never checked if any sound was coming through to begin with. Let's see. Enjoyed in the past. They own 100... Yeah, it sounds like it is. I'll just put my faith in the idea that things can't possibly get much worse. Anyway, so they own the majority of Marvelous. They have 100% of Riot Games, or famously Riot Game, since they only have one game of consequence, and every time they release another one, it's a disaster. Although I do know a guy who plays Valorant. He seems to enjoy it too. Don't know why, but he said he's never played any others like it, so... They own 80% of Grinding Gear Games, 40% of Epic Games, 29% of Funcom, condolences, 5% in ActiBliz, 5% in Ubisoft, 5% in Paradox. They own a major investment in Platinum Games, majority stake in Clay Entertainment, minority stake in Don't Nod Entertainment, and there are a whole bunch of others as well. Basically, they're trying to build themselves up into the developer, like worldwide. And they already can make a credible claim that they are the largest single financer of game development in the world, because they've got stakes in so many major companies. So they're also internally trying to develop studios by harvesting talent that... Basically, there's lots of talent being driven out of the industry at the moment because of the amount of controversies taking place and all that kind of thing. People disagreeing over projects, major companies deciding that they want to just repeat franchise every year rather than do anything interesting. I mean, you can see the massive flood of people leaving Blizzard over the course of recent years due to Blizzard's poor decision making. You can see the sudden increase in free agents as Sony dissolves their Japan studio and so on. With these free agents moving into the job market, Tencent is one of the many companies that is prowling around looking for people to hire so they can get them involved in in-house projects funded and published by Tencent themselves. So yeah. So I don't really have much to reveal about this process, but it is an ongoing process. This is not blown over. Tencent still has to fight to keep their investments, and they've just not really got a very good track record. If people remember things like when Valorant came out, Riot had that kernel level anti-cheat that was on always, and you couldn't turn it off at launch, if I recall correctly, and it would just harvest all the information from your computer at a kernel level in order to allegedly prevent cheating. But Riot is owned by Tencent, and business regulations in China say that all information you have as a company needs to be available to the government. This is just, to anybody right thinking, this should be unacceptable. But people are like with their consumer products. I'm not really any different. I would like to be, but there's a lot to think about. Anyway, let's move on, because Tencent is boring and stupid in Chinese. And also because we don't have any resolution on that issue yet. It's an ongoing discussion. And frankly, I'd be happy if they just got booted out of the West. Let them do their business in China. The last thing I need is another bunch of idiots trying to censor games. It's bad enough with Sony having decided to take the censorship pill because they moved to California. Ugh. Moving on. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I don't know if anybody remembers this. I played it quite a bit when I was younger. It was a big hit on the PS2. 2001. 20 years ago. 2 decades ago. Are you feeling old yet? So yeah, it was a fun little sort of action RPG style thing. Very Diablo styled, except it was on a console, and it had 2-player, which was great. I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't happen anymore almost, where you get 2 people sitting side by side on the couch in front of the console playing a game. But this is basically a Diablo except 2-player like that. It was great. Everybody loved it. Cult classic. Being that it's a Baldur's Gate game, takes place in the Forgotten Realms. Lots of well-known characters in that setting. Lots of classic D&D spells and so on and so forth. I played quite a bit of it, to be honest. So they are they were bringing it to modern consoles. They remastered it, apparently. I think they remastered it. Is it a remaster or a port? I can't even tell. I think it's a port. Yeah, and the graphics are enhanced and up to 4K resolution, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. At any rate, it's already out now. It came out on May the 7th. PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and supposedly the Switch, but apparently the Switch one got delayed because there was an issue with the store or something, store distribution. that's cool. I'm interested in all that. But what I have heard subsequently, and this is just sort of like word of mouth on social media, so to speak, is that it's a really sloppy port. It's just not done very well. So I'd probably hold fire on that and see if it improves a little bit. Maybe these are issues that people can fix up somehow. But yeah, people have not been saying that much that's nice about it, which is sad because it was just kind of an important part of my console history, I suppose. It was a fun game to play. I really very much enjoyed it. It's also 20 years old though, so don't expect anything great. Like if you look at the screenshots that you can find around the place, I mean, yes, it's true that they've improved the graphics a little bit, but it still looks like a 20-year-old game, and it didn't look that great originally either. So it is a PS2 game. Come on. But yeah, I'm still glad to see people haven't forgotten it and it's still around. But I'd sort of hoped for a better port than that. Or better yet, just stop remaking the same game again and then come up with something new. Like, why can't there be another Dark Alliance game as opposed to just republishing the original again? Is it really the way it has to be? Come on. At any rate, there's another news article that I was going to talk about CD Projekt Red's profit sharing thing and the way they separated, I think, like $55 million in their profit share agreement, and then they split it 50-50 between the employees and the CEOs. But yeah, I don't really know much about that, and I haven't played Cyberpunk, so I don't really want to talk about how it was a pile of garbage either. So yeah, I don't really want to go on much longer because my throat's really starting to get mad at me for even attempting to do a solo show. How long have I been carrying on? A little while. Okay, so I'll call this to a close now. I think I've covered the news adequately, I feel. But please do write us if you've got any interesting things to say, or even uninteresting things to say. We'll take what content we can get, man. Please write us or contact us on Discord, talk to us, complain to us, whinge about how we've got horrible bigoted views and we'll laugh at you, and so on. But yeah, by all means contact us, send us content. Any feedback we get from the people that listen to the show is always good to talk about, because I would like to feel like I'm in communication with some people. I'm glad Serethus talks to me online sometimes. But yeah, I tried. Okay, I did my best. My throat feels really bad right now, but I tried to fill in for Aristeal and Fern. I did the very best that I could. We'll just have to make do with that. This has been No Excuses episode 470, I believe, and I hope Fern will come and clean this up afterwards because I've made a mess of it. But yeah, sorry that the other show hosts weren't here, but I got sort of last minute notification that I was going to be by myself, so I ended up not being able to find a pinch hitter to save me in time. I had somebody who was willing, but they were also going to bed because they live in the UK, so it was 3 a.m. So yeah, at any rate, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week, hopefully with all of the show hosts if we're lucky, and another and a more stable and organised show, which involves a lot less croaking and going to look for drinks on my part, hopefully. But yeah, thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Bye bye.